We all went at different times. We're different specialists. We don't have the same training. We're different parts of the country. Went to different hospitals. And we all saw kids coming in with gunshot wounds in the head, single shots, chest, abdomen. When I went last time, when I was there in August, I had 18 documented cases, at least 18, that I took pictures of. And I also took writing in my journal and things like that, that are separate from that. So, and those pictures are hard to look at for me. So every time I go back and I look at them, I find a new picture, oh, I forgot about this one. And then I also tried to document it in writing. So, I had at least 18 of children, children. So it's, we can't all be lying.
18 children with a bullet in their head.
Yeah, head or chest or neck. And then when I went back in December, I had a couple of those cases as well as women with, a sniper shot to the head.
Welcome to Far Out with Faust, everybody. I am Faust Chicho, in case you're just tuning in, and I am very honored to be joined by Dr. Mimi Syed. Dr. Mimi has been to the front lines of Gaza twice in the last 2 years. She's an American board-certified emergency medicine physician, and I have invited her here to tell me about her experience there, tell me what she was able to see firsthand, and it's, she's obviously very busy saving lives. So for her to come here it's a tremendous honor, and I'm so grateful for your time. So thank you for beaming in with me, Dr. Mimi.
Thanks for having me.
So I guess we should begin with maybe giving everyone a little background about yourself. You're an American. You're not dual citizenship with the Palestinian cause, or because that's the first thing people, imagine when they see doctors going to help. They must have family there. Mm-hmm. So give everyone a little background of where you're coming from and how you ended up, volunteering over there.
Yeah, no, I'm an American-born citizen. I have no ties to Palestine. I'm not Arab descent. I'm not Muslim. I don't have any of those ties. But I am a humanitarian. I'm a physician. I'm a mother. So naturally, I was compelled to go, especially when I kept seeing scenes of children over and over again. And my first time there was in August. So I had already been seeing it for quite some time. And I've not really done conflict zone work in the past. This is my very first. I did some COVID relief in New York. But other than that, this is my very first kind of global medical mission.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's that must have been a shock to. I don't know what algorithms other people have going on, but I've been looking at rubble and body parts for over a year now. And so this whole notion that what's happening is not actually happening, that it's somehow propaganda, to me it's just complete cognitive dissonance. If you don't think anything is happening, let me give you my Instagram account and scroll through for an hour, and you'll see just what happened today. Let alone since every day since October 7th, right. 2 years ago. Yeah. And then we talked about this last night. The first thing people want to do is say, "Oh, it's not true. It can't be true." Mm-hmm. But you saw what you saw, and then you got there. So, what was it just as shocking getting there? I'm sure. Compared to what you were seeing, was it worse than what you were seeing?
Yeah, and I think, it's hard to kind of imagine it unless you actually see it sometimes. You see the pictures, but when it's in front of you, it just feels very different. But just the scene of Gaza is apocalyptic, right? Totally. It's surreal. You go in and it's complete rubble. Everything is destroyed. And, as the progression of my trip went, so I entered in early August, and when I exited, it was worse than when I first entered. And then I went back in December and it was worse. And then when I left, it was even worse. So it just exponentially keeps getting worse. But what you see there in terms of the medical cases, there is no specialty that actually trains you for that magnitude of casualties. And then, and the population that you're treating. in any kind of, conventional, I guess, conflict zone, you get pediatric patients and they're horrendous injuries, but not to that level and not those numbers. Because most of our patients are children, like small children. And all of my colleagues have said the same. 50% of Gaza is their children. And they're not children where you can mistake them for adults or they're late teens or something. These are small children under the age of 12. And to see these horrendous types of injuries in these kids is not normal, even for a conflict zone. The sheer numbers are not normal. So, and then the constant and the frequency of it. So, you get a mass casualty incident in the U.S., for example, or any conflict zone. The worst thing that could happen. You have a mass shooting like we do have in this country, and it happens once, and hopefully not again and again for the same hospital. But in Gaza, it's dozens and dozens, up to like 100 patients or so that we had one time, that come in over and over again throughout the day. So it's just constant. It doesn't stop. And it's been going on for 20 months, restarted in on March 18th after a brief ceasefire. So it's just, it's not something anybody could prepare for.
No.
No.
And when you say the same people came in over and over, you mean so they would come in and get treated, go back out, somehow end up where another bomb has dropped? Is that?
No, I don't mean the same patients exactly. I just mean the same type of patients. So you're having traumatic amputations come in, burn wounds, shrapnel injuries, gunshot wounds.
And then a whole other set of people with the same exact wound.
And again, exactly. And even if you treat these people, like you said, there's no guarantee they're not going to go back out and get bombed again or shot again or get sick and come back. So, yeah. So
what do you say to the people who insist that, this is war? And that's what happens in war, and all this bullshit that comes out of people's mouths to justify what we can see is happening, what you witnessed with your own eyes is happening. What do you say to people whose argument is, well, they shouldn't have attacked on October 7th, or this is war, fuck around and find out. Excuse me, I shouldn't swear. F around and find out. That's what they did, right?
Yeah, I mean, war is, so a couple different things. War is you have somewhat equal sides, right?
Yeah.
In this situation, we have the world's most sophisticated, powerful, and rich military systems. You have the U.S. and Israel, and they are against literally children. They are fighting children.
Throwing rocks.
Or people in flip-flops, soldiers in flip-flops. This is a population, this did not obviously start on October 7th, right? This is a population that has been oppressed for decades. And so things have been very regulated, past the Israeli the government. So it's not like they were living under freedom and democracy and things like that. This is very highly regulated and controlled.
It's an apartheid.
Yes, it's exactly an apartheid. And so you had already this oppressed population, who actually were chronically malnourished already because of things being so regulated by the Israeli government. But then now you're adding to it an insult that is so out of proportion that they can't sustain it any longer. No. And so this is not just like regular war, this is collateral damage type of thing. Right. No. This is, and when you go there, when you see the images, I mean, you're seeing children. Yeah. That's not normal war, right? No. It's.
And how do you explain miles of rubble? Like, when have you ever, besides Hiroshima and Nagasaki, when have you ever seen literally miles of nothing but rubble from bombs? Right. We've never seen anything of the sort.
It looks like a nuclear attack.
It does. And when you add up the tonnage of what was dropped, it is essentially more than one.
Yeah. And then, show me the Israeli side.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody ever shows those damaged sites, right?
It's funny. Since October 7th, I haven't seen a single video clip of a Hamas soldier ambushing, attacking an Israeli. I've seen some people throwing rocks that didn't look like soldiers. I've seen children being obliterated from, aerial drone warfare. But I have yet to see, and I imagine given the state of news and propaganda and public opinion that they're trying to maintain the justification of what they're doing, that if there was a single video clip of a Hamas soldier surprising, ambushing, hurting, or doing anything to an Israeli soldier, it would be on the news.
Well, I mean, I have seen footage. Hamas does put out, I don't know if it's on Twitter or what it's on, but they do, and I'm sure it's for, just morale of the country.
Telegram,
yeah, I think, something like that. But it's like defending themselves and shooting, the Israeli soldiers or whatever they're alleging. But I mean, but they're not. There's no drone strikes. There's no, air strikes. Like
they don't have. Yeah, it's not an army.
Yeah. No, they don't have that. They don't
even have uniforms, which is usually a real key indicator that you're in an army.
I mean, boots. The ones we've seen, they have like Adidas flip flops on or something, or tracksuits. So yeah, I mean, this is not the normal. And then the second part of that is there are rules of engagement. Right. So this is, I compared to I just got back from Sarajevo and I was learning about the history there. And their military was also not very sophisticated. And the Bosnian military was not sophisticated when the Serbs attacked. And so they had to create one.
Yeah.
And it started very rudimentary, but there were still rules of engagement, right? They were able to go under in a tunnel under the airport and then get to the other side where there was no attack. So it was kind of contained to a certain extent, but it still wasn't as bad as the situation in Gaza Strip because they're trapped. They can't go anywhere. No. They can't even hide to go anywhere. They can't even sneak out. So it's just, it's a completely different, rule system. There are no rules, and there's no laws being followed, no international humanitarian laws. No, completely
they won't
violent.
Even let anyone in. They won't even let journalists in.
There's no journalists. That's why you can't count the death toll because there's no independent investigation or analysis of what happened and who the numbers are. It's because nobody's allowed in.
Right.
So.
And I have a whole spiel about the death toll, and the fact that, it's the terrorists, the ones doing accounting, you can't trust them. I'm like, no, actually, that's not true. As Dr. Feroz, so well articulated in my interview with him, he said that the Gaza Health Ministry is run by Israel and Palestine and Hamas, and it's always been that. And if you look historically at the numbers, there's never been any widespread inaccuracy. They've always been pretty much on the dot. So why would there is no historical, what do you call it? Reason to imagine that just this time, their numbers are completely blown out of proportion. You know what I mean? I look at things in context. That's one of the things I love doing, and people freaking hate when you do that. Whether you're looking at the statistics of a certain, new virus or whatever, I'm like, why don't we look at things as a whole? Climate change? No. Don't look at the whole. Just look at what's happening right now. But won't we get a better idea of what's happening right now if we look at everything? No. That's
right.
How you know propaganda is
and
in
that's
effect.
The problem. Everything is in a vacuum in this situation, right? But that's the kind of narrative that the Israeli government pushes. It's everything comes down to Hamas. So, and it's kind of ridiculous because if you think about it, they were the elected power, right? And so they were a governmental, entity at that point.
Yeah.
And you suddenly have declared them a terrorist. So now anyone that had anything to do with it, which would be all of the the people that worked for Palestine or for Gaza, they're immediately now they're Hamas. The mailman is
they're
Hamas.
All Hamas.
But that's what that was. That doesn't mean they're the part of the brigade, the fighting, the fighting brigade or the soldiers or anything like that. But they're, it's like saying, I don't know, tomorrow if you declare all Republicans terrorists and then said, oh, wait, you are a Republican, therefore you are now a terrorist.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
So it's kind of absurd. And then to mention also Ministry of Health, they're actually very conservative in how they count their numbers because they don't want to be wrong.
That's right.
And they want to have credibility. So they actually underestimate the numbers. And I've seen it. If there's no complete guarantee that this happened because of the Israeli airstrike or something, if there's any question that it could have been a civil unrest or something, they won't count it.
No.
It's no, but we don't know that, let's ask more questions.
Right.
But they're so, careful about that.
And Dr. Feroz said that those numbers, those confirmed numbers, are coming right from the hospitals. They're not coming from, and those hospitals, they're a little busy. They're not like, oh, well, let's make sure that this looks good.
I mean, it's absurd.
Like, he's like, it literally comes from the hospital.
Yes. And it's like, if you're saying a conspiracy where the entire, everybody is lying, including us, the foreign doctors.
Including,
I mean,
paid actors.
That's kind of absurd. It's kind of just ridiculous. It's illogical.
I told you last night, the first time I posted the video of that doctor who came back and witnessed these children being sniped, the comments I got were accusing him of being a very good actor, which I was like, I was just, again, I almost fell off my seat laughing. Like I couldn't believe that somebody, the mental gymnastics that you have to do in order to be like, this can't really be happening.
I mean, that's ridiculous. And that's the thing. None of us knew each other before, right? Before Gaza. I didn't know Feroz. I didn't know Mark. I don't know any of them. I've met them once.
Yeah.
And all of us came back and we could finish each other's sentences because of the similarity of the things that we saw. And that's pretty profound, right? We all went at different times. We're different specialists. We don't have the same training. We're different parts of the country. Went to different hospitals. And we all saw kids coming in with gunshot wounds in the head, single shots, chest, abdomen. When I went last time, when I was there in August, I had 18 documented cases, at least 18, that I took pictures of. And I also took writing in my journal and things like that that are separate from that. So, and those pictures are hard to look at for me. So every time I go back and I look at them, I find a new picture, oh, I forgot about this one. And then I also tried to document it in writing. So, I had at least 18 of children, children. So it's, we can't all be lying.
18 children with a bullet in their head. Yeah,
head or chest or neck. And then when I went back in December, I had a couple of those cases as well as women with, a sniper shot to the head.
So for those of you who are listening who aren't familiar, snipers are trained to aim for the chest or head, whatever is available. Both will do the job. And it's not an accident. It's not what do you call it? Collateral damage of a shootout. Maybe 1 out of 99, might be. But when you have kids being brought in with the same kind of gunshot wounds and the same placement of a bullet, you're talking about snipers. And snipers know exactly what they're aiming at and when they pull the trigger. It's not, there is no accident. There's not this is not just a symptom of war and war is hell. And these are deliberate killing of children that is happening. And understand that there is a portion of the IDF that considers these kids animals, and they're more than happy to chalk up as many trophies as they can by knocking them off. And that's the truth that people don't want to hear, they don't want to believe. But how else do you explain, 12,000 children have been, obviously some part of their culture is absolutely okay with the slaughter of children, as long as they're not Jewish.
Well,
Israeli, I should say.
Yeah, and there's this question of whether they're drones or they're snipers, and nobody's really caught on camera, what they call a quadcopter, which it's from what I understand, a drone that has shooting capability. But whenever we would have patients come in, I would always ask, what happened? And they would say either sniper or quadcopter. And I think, and I don't know much about munition. I'm not military trained or anything like that. But, there are snipers. But also these drones do surveillance and they can identify. And I'm sure that there is this information exchange, or I don't know exactly what happens, but I know what I saw.
Yeah.
I saw children with gunshots to the head. And it was every day.
Every day.
Every day. There for 4 weeks, every day.
My God. That's so traumatic for you, let alone the families. And it's just terrible. So you were there every single day. I'm sure you saw more than just that. I'm sure you saw, these bombs, the modern day weaponry that is used is just as lethal as it gets. They're hellish. They're designed to shred and destroy. And so,
and they do it at times where they know that families are together, or there's, like a soccer game, for example, and children are playing together at night when families are in the tent together. Evacuation times. So that's like a congregation of people. It's very chaotic. I remember a kid that came in that it's like etched in my mind. It was like a 2 to 3 year old little boy who came in, who was brought in. This was during an evacuation order. And during that time, just to kind of set the scene, it's complete chaos, right? There's people on the roads. You can barely go anywhere.
Right.
And people are just on top of each other. There's like donkey carts and horse carts, maybe a car or two. But people are basically grabbing their stuff and like trying to move, right? And so during these times, there's a mass casualty incident. And I remember this guy came in, frantic, who's holding a little baby, like a 2 to 3 year old little boy. And he laid him on the ground. And he's like, I ran over this child. I don't know where the mom is. I don't know where the dad is. I think I ran over him. And I looked at his abdomen, and he had like a tire mark across his abdomen. But then we examined him further, and he had one hole in his head, like one wound. And then we like shortly after that, the mom comes running in and says, "Is that my child? Is that my child?" And we asked her what happened. She said during this whole this whole evacuation, it was so chaotic, she lost track of him. And then they started hearing drones overhead and gunshots. And it turns out he was shot in the head, went down, and the car just ran over him because it was so chaotic.
Yeah.
But I mean, I couldn't stop thinking about that mom.
Yeah.
She was just destroyed.
Oh my God.
And how many times does it happen? I mean, that was just one kid that I remembered that story, but it happened over and over again.
It's not, it's not an accident. This is what people need to understand is this is happening methodically, and they're using AI software from American tech companies and people, who have high seats in the White House to do this. And these quadcopters, they're drones. So their surveillance is probably absolutely state of the art, just because they figured out a way to add munitions to it and target specifically. It becomes like a video game for these people, because they're literally flying a machine that, like, probably on an iPad. They can see exactly where they're aiming. They can put the crosshairs up and they can pull the trigger. And literally that's what's happening. Even among the chaos, it's not like they can't see.
Yeah, and I mean, if you take that human component out of it too, because it's like a video game, right? So even the people, if this is how it is happening, I don't know. But if you told them that there's a person on the end of this, like, look, this is the child at the end of it, God, I would hope, just for the sake of humanity, that they wouldn't pull that trigger.
They're pulling the trigger.
But it's just, I mean, it's unfathomable.
There's a complete dehumanization.
Oh, well, this is how we're here. This is a complete dehumanization of the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. I think that's the biggest part of what's happening, because people ask this a lot, how did we get here? And it's, a component of racism, dehumanization, just complete cognitive dissonance, as you said, that allows this to happen. Because if you dehumanize people, you can do anything you want to them.
Yeah.
And it's justified. You can say, oh, well, you can shoot this child in the head because they're going to grow up to be terrorists anyway.
Yeah. But
so
they're animals.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Exactly.
And that's one of the reasons why people stereotype and they make the mistake of doing this. They say, oh, well, all Jews think of other non-Jews as goyim, as cattle. And I don't believe that's true, first of all. I know, like you, I lived in New York City, and I know a lot of Jewish people, and they don't think that. They're not raised with that belief.
Right.
I don't know if that is like where exactly that comes from, that word goyim, and how but I do know that Israel is and has been its own entity, as far as it's tried to become the representation of global Judaism, because it wants that support. It wants the global support, The problem is its actions, from its conception, have not been in any alignment with Jewish traditional Torah beliefs.
That's the problem, right?
You know?
They have conflated religion with their actions, and
Yes.
that's the most dangerous
And
thing.
their ethnicity.
Yeah, and that's actually the biggest problem with what's happening is, we talk about anti-Semitism, and Israel is the biggest source of anti-Semitism.
Oh, absolutely.
They're using the religion and people of that religion as their kind of reasoning for doing all of this to the people of Gaza. I mean, and that's the problem. I mean, all of this is, you cannot conflate politics and religion with what's happening in Gaza.
No.
It has nothing to do with it, to be honest. And Gaza has kind of separated that. And I know people are waking up and seeing it because it's pretty much exposed what's really happening.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say, this is justified because you were victimized before. These atrocious events happened to you, and now you have carte blanche to do whatever you want. It's ridiculous.
It's emotional manipulation.
It is emotional manipulation, and it's dangerous, but it's also now kind of like bullshit.
Yeah,
like people are seeing right through
how I
that.
feel about it. I mentioned it a little last night. It's all bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, you can't continue to just be a victim forever and do whatever you feel like doing to an entire human race. I mean, you just can't do that.
No.
And people need to wake up and just say that.
I mean, listen. There are certain channels on Instagram, some of which have gained a lot of followers. Where it's all like one guy, I forgot his name. He's fantastic. All he does is he finds a way to call into, sometimes it's youth, sometimes it's soldiers, but he's like, he ends up on a video call with someone in Israel, and he's like, I'm from Palestine, and they're like, what? And he's like, and then he asks them questions, and you see, like, sometimes it's two teenage girls, and they're like, they're laughing, and they're like, we don't want to talk to you. He's like, why? Because I'm Palestinian? Oh. And they're like, yeah, because you're a terrorist. Right. And he's like, I'm a terrorist? I don't even live in Palestine. He was like, but all the cultural conditioning and the brainwashing and indoctrination, if you want to see the level of it, and for some people, this will make you sick. Let me forewarn you. These videos will make you queasy. They are a testament to the level of indoctrination and dehumanization that goes into the youth of Israel. And that's why most of the country has been sitting around, some of them clapping, others being like, but not many, more now than ever, but not many being like, this shit has to stop, Right.
I mean, there's a lot of Israelis that are against this, right? And colleagues physicians for humanity in Israel. There's a lot of people that are trying to work against this and stop it because it's not in their interest. It's not in their safety at all. So,
no.
But yeah, I mean, and I think there's a moral injury that we can never recover from, and it's hard to kind of just put all the blame on Israel because the United States is equally responsible. I mean, that's the elephant in the room. You can't really ignore that fact.
No.
Being an American citizen, all our tax-paying dollars go to that.
Yeah.
And and so it's just it's important to recognize that it's the U.S. just as much as Israel.
Make no mistake about it. The United States has enabled this genocide from day one.
Yeah,
and they were licking their lips.
They continue to
for the amount of money that they were going to make, and because the arms industry is owned by the same people who own the oil industry and the banking industry.
Lucrative. Yeah.
So and there is nothing like war to turn a profit. They learned that. And they manipulate governments and events and people to create whatever conditions they need to create to have their war. And they've been doing this since fucking Napoleon. They've learned to do this really well. And it may take a decade, it may take two, but they get their war. I think this may be the first time, because of the level of weapons of mass destruction, because there can't just be a war the way there used to be without the possibility of annihilation. This is, God willing, we can stall this out long enough because 3 world wars was always the plan, and they're trying for the third. They're trying to bastardize Iran. Meanwhile, Iran has never attacked a neighbor. They have no, nuclear weapons. They're an existential threat to no one. They've been around forever. If they're messed up, it's because the United States has meddled so much in their government that we have thwarted what probably would have been, one of the coolest places to visit, and probably still is. And I'm told it is. But I know that the government in place now is very hard, and that's because the one we put in as a puppet was overthrown, with the Shah and all that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the scary part of this all, is that the U.S. is kind of thinks of itself as this beacon for humanity, and it's really just turned out...
The American people do, maybe.
And it's turned out to be like we're the biggest monsters of our lifetime. That's right now, and it's like eye-opening, and we're indoctrinated, like you went through the public, education system just like I did. And did you ever learn about this? I don't remember learning about this, right? Did you learn, about the U.S. and the policies and things like that? No. And
of course not.
International law is just like, it's been eye-opening to see that it could just be trampled underfoot. And nobody cares.
No.
I'm like, nobody is held accountable.
No. And so what good is it?
Right.
What good is the ICC?
But if we put sanctions on them, no good, right?
Yeah.
But the thing too is like, and Cobb, which was in the Kids Under Fire movie by Al Jazeera, the Fault Lines film about children who are being shot in the head, actually is a very good film that I would recommend.
Where can people see it?
It's actually on YouTube, and it's Kids Under Fire by Al Jazeera Fault Lines. It's a very good film. I think every tax-paying American should watch it.
Yeah.
And it's from former, U.S. officials that kind of are interviewing and saying how the Leahy Law is just not applied. And really what's being called for is just follow the law.
Yeah.
And it applies to every country except Israel.
Of course.
So it's like if we just follow the law the way it's written, and we saw Matt Miller, just a few days ago admitting, Israel's committed war crimes.
We also saw during the whole Musk-Trump family feud that popped off on Twitter, which I'm like, distraction anyone? Let's wait and see what's actually.
Yeah.
And
typical.
there was an Israeli official who admitted what many of us already are well aware of, and that is that Israel works with ISIS. Those Islamic terrorists that we're supposed to believe were our numero uno enemy number, Where do they go when they get shot? Israeli hospitals. Who treats them? Israeli doctors. Who do they work with? The Mossad. And this is the hardest thing for people to understand. The United States and Israel are in the habit and in the practice of funding both sides to every conflict that they want to happen. Yeah. And every conflict that happens on their watch can be avoided, but is systematically and methodically orchestrated to happen, just like October 7th was. And I was talking to you last night about 9/11 and telling you some of the facts of that and the impossibilities of the narrative that we were fed, and how it could have never happened without absolute coordination by the most nefarious and shadowy parts of the United States government. And the same goes for October 7th, because if you think that somehow Hamas got a few $1 billion worth of missiles and Israel was unaware, if you think that Israel was unaware they had the money, they got the missiles, they were going to launch. If you any of that, then you have no idea the reality of the situation, because that is laughable. They knew a year in advance because they had to know, because they had to get the money to Hamas so they could have their attack, and Bibi could have his retaliation, which would include the annexation and the dream of greater Israel, taking all that land.
And say you were wrong, and say someone was skeptical of that whole, hypothesis or whatever. If you dehumanize and oppress a population for decades and decades, over and over again, terrorize their kids, do not even allow, peaceful protesting. Like in 2014, they, sniper shot people that were, kids that were teenagers that were protesting in the street against it. You can't even do that. You can't speak against them. At some point, enough is enough. And human nature just simply will lead to resistance.
Yeah.
Right. We've seen it time and time again in history. And so when, people say, well, but Hamas, you can't take it from October 7th because it's been going on since 1967. And if I was threatening your children's safety, regulating everything in your life, basically in an open air prison,
keeping you penned in a freaking
yeah, exactly. You're going to resist.
Yeah.
If I take over your land and kick you out and threaten everything about your livelihood and your just overall well-being, you're going to resist. It's human nature to resist.
Yeah.
I'm a mother. You're a father. If someone harmed your child, if they were holding them hostage essentially or keeping them a prisoner, you would do everything in your power to protect them.
That's right.
And I don't know why those rules don't apply to Palestinians. I don't know why.
And why the law doesn't apply to Israeli or its settlers.
Exactly.
Because theft is theft. And they're literally, and this is why the UN and these places that were formed, they were formed like all these NGOs, like they were formed for show. They were like the United Nations. It was so before the United Nations, there was the League of Nations, right, from World War I. And the League of Nations' job was to make sure that another war never happened again. And they had investigative power. This is why they had to go, because the powers that shouldn't be were trying to orchestrate and false flag on things for World War II. And the League of Nations went in and investigated, and they said, you know what? That wasn't, I think it was Japan. That wasn't China who did that. Japan bombed themselves. And they were like, whoa, this isn't going to work. We can't get World War II ramped up if they're going to be calling us out like that. And they got rid of the League of Nations. And the United Nations doesn't have that kind of investigative power to go in and then report back to everyone, this is what I saw. This is what our investigative team, because if you had that kind of power and team, no war would ever happen where you were like, oh my God, we got surprise attacked. Did you see what happened to Pearl Harbor? Actually, no, it was investigated, and we knew about Pearl Harbor months in advance, and we were baiting it. You see the problem. They want a centralized power, but they don't want to give the centralized power that they have more than they need to, because it would thwart their plans.
Well, that's the thing too with the UN. You mentioned the UN, and they have declared this, war crimes and genocide and things like that. And they condemn, Israel. But it's an empty threat. Have you done anything about
Nothing.
it? Have you taken any, action towards Israel? No one has. Really, no one has.
No.
Because, France and UK keep saying, oh, well, we're going to put sanctions on you. And they have to the West Bank settlers. What about the rest of the country?
And what do the sanctions mean? What are they doing to stop the settlers?
But they say it, they condemn them, and then they turn around and sell them arms.
Yeah.
I mean, this is ridiculous, right? And the world needs to see that and recognize it, because yes, everyone's speaking out and saying these things about them and that they're committing war crimes, but what are you doing about it? No one is doing a thing about it.
Yeah. And
people need, the countries, the governmental bodies of countries need to take action. You put sanctions on them, don't sell them arms, and
it should be a fucking worldwide embargo. Let's be real. They should be cut off until they stop.
Agreed.
This is the only way.
Agreed.
This is the only kind of pressure.
That's not happening.
No, it's not happening at all. They're passing laws in this country saying you can't boycott Israel.
Right.
Come again? We don't have a choice of where we want to spend our money. Not only is the government captured, owned, bribed, blackmailed by AIPAC and the Israeli Mossad and intelligence agencies, but to add insult to injury in, I think, 26 states, you can't boycott Israeli companies.
Yeah.
That is insanity. That is not freedom of anything. That's a mockery of freedom.
And I think in Florida you can't go to the protests either, right? I think there's some, if you work for the state, then you can't participate in any of that. So you can get fired or whatever. But yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. Yeah, and I mean that's the thing too is, I'm not for violence in any way. I'm a physician. I don't believe in violence. But that we have to look at this in context is there is resistance, and there will always be resistance. as long as you completely oppress a population and dehumanize them, there will be resistance. And that's the lesson to be learned, is that you're never going to get rid of resistance if you continue to do this.
No, it's in the human spirit, thank God. And oppression, it's like a rubber band. It's going to come back.
Yeah. I mean, and you talk about this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, this ridiculous cluster, because I wanted to mention it because it's a death trap. They have been starving the people of Gaza since, March 2nd. I think that was the last day, I believe, that food was allowed to enter. And since then, now we know that, U.S. and Israel have kind of collaborated and made this foundation.
I saw China flew some planes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was like a rumor. I don't think that was I think those were from the U.S.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
China.
But I don't know. I don't know for sure.
I wonder who spun it and said it was China.
Yeah, I don't know how that came about. I think I saw that briefly on a TikTok or something like that. But yeah, this foundation, I mean, so you have a completely starving population, mothers or, fathers. They're making them walk miles, to Rafah, to one point where they're distributing aid, one point. And it's not like they're flooding the markets with food or anything. They're trickling in small amount of food. If you don't have some kind of desperation and civil unrest there, that would be an abnormal situation.
Yeah.
You should absolutely expect that people will do anything they can to feed their children. That includes violence.
Yeah.
That does not mean that they are animals. That does not mean that they're criminals. That's why we're shooting them. So what do? They turn around and shoot these people. And then they can turn around and say, look, they're animals, they're criminals. That's why we have to shoot them. We're trying to defend ourselves.
And then they'll turn around and see, look how they act when there's food being handed out.
Yeah, and then
like starving people.
Yeah, exactly. And they're saying, well, Hamas is taking it. No, there is no such. It's and I have people that I talk to on the ground, colleagues, people who have actually gone to these points, and they're like, what are you talking about? There's no Hamas here.
Right.
These are just civilians trying to get food for their families. How do you avoid this? Let unlimited amount of food in.
Yeah.
That's the way you avoid it.
Not humanitarian aid in.
Exactly. Not trickling in like bits of food. It doesn't make any sense. And I think it's like this person, I can't remember who I heard, talking about it, but the person that's responsible for this and organized this, a person that has zero experience in distributing aid.
And the UN, who does have massive experience.
They're taken out of this.
They're not allowed in.
Exactly. They're taken out of this whole equation. And that's the problem is, let someone with experience do this.
Yeah, they know how to coordinate
They have none. And it's clear in what's happening. This is a death trap for all those people. And they've actually killed more than before they were starting to distribute aid. So it's just absurd. It's absurd that this continues to happen. And
I just don't know. And people keep saying, well, no other country will take them. I'm like, what country wants to do Israel a favor and be a part to this ethnic cleansing? What are you talking about? It's not a question of generosity. It's a question of principle. This was their land.
Right.
Why would Egypt say, oh, you know what, Israel, we'll solve that thing that you've been working on trying to solve yourselves for the last 75 years.
Yeah, we'll help you with the land grab.
We'll just take them all, You can stop dropping the bombs now. Like, wait, what? Like,
yeah, and this has nothing to do with Hamas or hostages or anything like that. This is a land grab, and this is exactly what's been happening. That's what this is about.
So, let's talk specifically about. I know you mentioned a case to me last night that you had a girl come in that was, I think it was photographed. You said. What else did you see that was there that you want people to know? Is happening and happening every day. Yeah,
I mean, we mentioned the gunshot wounds to the head in children, but Mira is a little girl, a 4-year-old that had a gunshot wound. I think that's the CT you're talking about. That was published in the New York Times in Feroz's article. But and that's what the Kids Under Fire kind of features her as well. But she was a little girl that was shot by a quadcopter or sniper, but ended up coming into the ER and almost died. And I was able to help her get to surgery, but she survived.
Yeah.
Miraculously, she survived. And I saw her when I went back in December.
Oh, wow.
I mean, she's got weakness on the left side of her body, but she's laughing and got the same, little
Wow.
sass that she did. And but
How old is she?
she's 4. She turned 5, I think, since then. But got the same, little
Wow.
sass that she did. And but
How old is she?
she's 4. She turned 5, I think, since then. But again, we can save kids and we can help them get the surgeries they need. But at the end of the day, they go right back out into that hell.
Yeah.
Where they can get shot again, or a bomb can drop on their head again, and or they're starved. But and since then, her mom, Isra, sustained a traumatic amputation to her leg.
Wow.
So now this is a primary caregiver that you've completely now taken away from her because she has to take care of herself now. But both these people now need a medical evacuation, and they're constantly denied. But I want people to understand who we treated. These are children. I remember a little girl coming in. She was about maybe 5. So there was a gentleman, an elderly gentleman that came in, and this was in the middle of the night, and he just had this blanket. He was holding a blanket wrapped up, a kid, visibly a kid. He laid her on the ground, and I looked at her, and she looked like she was sleeping. Just adorable 5-year-old little girl, 4-year-old or 5-year-old. And I thought she was sleeping, but I looked at her closely. She didn't have a mark on her. She's completely still. And she had rubble completely packed inside of her nostrils.
Oh, my God.
And some dust or something around her lips. And I asked the gentleman what happened. And he said, we found her under the rubble just now. And I knew before I touched her, I knew she was not going to be alive.
Yeah.
She had no pulse. But she had these like freshly painted purple nail polish on her fingernails. I mean, it tears you up inside.
Yeah.
That this is who is being treated. This is who is dying. These are the kids. They're children. This is a war against children. And this happened every day. And as like I said, as a mother, it just eats you up inside.
Yeah.
You imagine your own kid there.
People won't.
That's the thing about this is people don't realize, even take the whole Gaza situation out of this. This is the mainstream interest and popular view is we don't want to kill children. And what we need to understand is both parties in the U.S., our government, is not listening to what is in our interest, our collective interest. They're completely, blatantly ignoring it. That's what should concern most Americans, is that's actually a very dangerous precedent.
Oh, my God.
Right? So if it's about this, then what else is it going to be about? And then what else? And that's when people need to just wake up and be like, I don't want my tax dollars to go kill a 4-year-old.
No. And what is happening in with our representatives, that 99% of them are either quiet or advocating for Israel, somehow pretending they don't know the scale of destruction and slaughter that is being perpetrated on children under the age of 12 and women for the most part. What is going on in our government that has facilitated and allowed such a massive just delusion or worse, complete deception about what they understand is happening? AIPAC have handlers, and those handlers are there to say, this is what you're going to say to this is what you're going to say to that. We know that from the few that are independent or have been ousted from office because of AIPAC. They're like, we have they have an AIPAC handler, and the AIPAC handler goes where they go, and they tell them what to say about anything regarding Israel. That's part of the deal and the oath that they take when they take money for their campaigns, and a significant amount of money it is. And the bigger the office, the more money is thrown their way, and that's bribery. That's why JFK wanted them to have to register as a foreign agent, so they couldn't get away with that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing too. A lot of this is driven by fear as well, right?
Oh yeah.
Especially just the normal American, they're afraid of speaking up because they'll be labeled in such a way. They'll be labeled as an anti-Semite or labeled as a Hamas sympathizer, which all of us doctors have been labeled as, of course. And so, or like a Hamas mouthpiece. I think I've been called that several times. But that I'm on their payroll or something.
Yeah,
Like,
because they have a
I
payroll.
don't see that money. Yeah. So it's kind of ridiculous. But, I think it's important because recently, you've seen Miss Rachel being targeted. Miss Rachel,
poor Miss Rachel,
the angel, for children. I mean, honestly, she's like the beacon of like just humanity. But she has been told, I was watching, I think.
So tell everyone who Miss Rachel is.
Yeah, so Miss Rachel is this, she's actually a teacher. She's a preschool teacher, I think. And she teaches little kids like how to talk and like, just basic toddler things.
Yeah.
I mean, my kids, of course, like were
she's
religiously
a YouTube entity. She has a YouTube channel,
she's
a lot of followers.
Huge, right. And she's just an angel, right? There's nothing you could see her and say, oh, she's evil or she's bad or something. But rightfully so. She's an advocate for children, and she spoke up about the children of Gaza, as she should, just like a normal human being should, right? And she even spoke up about, the children that were taken hostage and killed, the Bibis children. And somehow she became a Hamas sympathizer. I mean, just literally overnight. She became, they called for her investigation, and all sorts of odd things. And she's like, no, I'm not going to back down.
Yeah.
Exactly what a human being should do. I was watching, I think it was Fox News. I know I shouldn't expect much from that. But but they were saying how, Mr. Rogers wouldn't have said anything about, these type of things.
Yeah, he might have.
Why are you saying it, Miss Rachel? Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane, yeah.
It is her lane.
Yeah.
It's my lane. It's
children.
Your lane. It's everybody's lane. If you are a human being, this is your lane. And shame on you if you don't say something.
That's right.
That's how it should be. Just because you have a certain credential behind your name or something, that gives you the right to speak about it, but others don't. Right. No, that's the part that's dangerous.
No.
If you have children, you should be speaking about this.
Even if you don't have children, you were a child once. You have a niece or a nephew.
I mean, honestly, you're a psychopath if you don't think that this is wrong, right? If you think that this is completely justified, you have some mental pathology. You have an issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
look, if we can't protect the youngest and most vulnerable among us, we are doomed as a species.
Absolutely.
And you don't need to be any kind of credentialed academic to make a simple observation like that. You don't even have to be looking down on the earth from outer space. It is common sense. But common sense is what we have been conditioned out of in this society, particularly in the West. The East has their own problems that they've been conditioned into and out of. But, this is not an issue that is for certain people. It should be an issue for the human race.
Exactly.
You're talking about children, innocent children.
Right. And you're just talking about the acute nature of it right now. But, you have to talk about the long-term nature of this insidious process that's been kind of that's been laid down by the Israeli government. And that's something that people actually ignore a lot in the media is they're seeing these, bombardments and these traumatic injuries come out and the images come out. And that's the only thing you can think about.
Yeah.
A child that's beheaded and decapitated, and a father is holding her in his arms. That's going to take your attention. It's very attention grabbing, as it should be. But what we need to pay attention also to is, they could stop the bombardment tomorrow, but the level of destruction that's been had, like that's laid down by the Israeli government in Gaza, is tremendous.
Oh yeah,
it's not going away if there's a ceasefire tomorrow.
No,
right?
And so, what are all those people going to do?
Exactly, like you're talking about the electricity grid completely destroyed.
No infrastructure. Yeah.
You have no water, sanitation, no sewage system. Your hospitals are bare bones. The staff has been imprisoned, unjustly or been killed. So your healthcare system is completely destroyed. So you have a lot of repair that needs to be done. The rubble, God, I mean, you need the rubble is just going to take years to clear.
Right.
But you've also created, and this is before October 7th, but you've created a population that is completely dependent on aid coming in because you've also ruined the agricultural land. The bombs and the chemicals, the heavy metals that have been dropped, the buildings, I don't know what's in the buildings and the rubble that are in the ground now and completely contaminated the agricultural land. So there's so much repair to be done that You have to realize that the people of Gaza are no longer going to be able to sustain themselves as it stands, but aid needs to be allowed in to allow that to happen.
I don't know what they're gonna. I don't know what they're gonna do. I don't know what they can do. But we talked a little bit about some of the pictures and documents you brought back from the cases you have, and I don't want to miss the opportunity to make sure that those get included into the edit for the people watching this. And I was wondering if there was any couple in particular that you wanted to describe for people to just really fully understand the scale and the level of suffering that is going on for people like you who are and all you're doing is obviously working on patients, but what they're coming in with. Is there a few that you can describe that we can include some of the documentation you brought back so people can get a visual and also hear the harrowing account of what these poor children are suffering through? Yeah,
I mean, the examples I can talk for days about it because there's so many. I mean, there's just so many, and I have pictures and videos of so many things. But there's an example of a little girl that I talked about. Her name is Allah. She's 8 years old, but I spoke about her in other interviews, but also my testimony in Sarajevo for the Gaza Tribunal. Yeah. But she's an 8-year-old little girl that came in when I was there in December, and she had a shrapnel injury. There was an airstrike right in front of her tent when she was playing, and her father brought her in an ambulance. And her skull, half of it was removed, and half her brain was basically exposed. In casualty and some mass casualty incidents, and especially when resources are lacking, like it was, when I was there, and still is, even worse now. But there's a very poor prognosis for patients that have open head wounds.
Yeah.
And so patients like that would just be left to die. Because, if you did anything for them, you would have to keep them in an ICU. There's no beds, there's no surgeon, there's no antibiotics. So the rates of infection of those type of wounds is so high. So the plan is to just let them die. But I remember seeing this father that was with her, and he just looked at me with his eyes, because the plan was just let her die and I was going to move on to the next patient. But I stopped dead in my tracks. I just looked at him, and he's like, "You're going to save my baby girl."
Yeah.
And how do I just walk away from that? I couldn't. And I just, I was like, okay, I'll intubate her, right? That's the first step to kind of save someone and then get them to surgery to stabilize them. But I had to smuggle a laryngoscope in. And this is a little handheld, like it's the size of my palm. And I had to smuggle it in. And that's what we used to secure someone's airway. Because the Israeli government doesn't allow you to bring anything. The military doesn't allow you.
So you had to fly in with one?
I flew in and I hid it in my suitcase. I did that both times. They weren't able to find it. But it's a small...
So you had to smuggle in a life-saving medical device?
Because you're not allowed to bring it in.
Oh, my God.
And I pulled it out of my tackle bag, and I obviously secured her airway, but I was able to get a surgeon to take care of her. And miraculously, she survived.
Wow, that's amazing.
3 weeks later, her dad sends me a video on WhatsApp because, he's keeping in touch with me. And I was at a different hospital at that point. And she's like walking and reading.
That's beautiful.
And she comes in the center of the frame and she's like, "Shukran, doctora." Thank you, doctor. Mm-hmm. I'm okay now.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, this is a silver lining. Like I actually did something, and we did that all the time, save kids too. But just to see it was amazing. It was a miracle. But I just had this like sense of underlying guilt, sadness, anger. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's like I knew that this child is still, has death looming over them because she has a skin flap covering her brain. So if she falls, because there's rubble everywhere, she doesn't have any safe way of kind of ambulating. She can be dehydrated or malnourished. There's no clean water. That site of surgery that could be infected. She can get terrible infection, like a central nervous system infection. So there's just so many things that could still happen. And like,
she can't get the care that she truly needs.
She can't get the care she needs. She needs a bone graft or a titanium plate or something to cover her brain.
My God.
I mean, and there are so many kids like that. She's lucky she survived.
Yeah.
But just that kind of that just disgusting gnawing feeling that I still have, And I think
because it's
about her.
like because you've done a job, but you know it's unfinished. And what could be more frustrating than that? Knowing
Exactly.
that this is all you could do, but there's so much more that could be done.
I mean, the fact that this girl miraculously survived, right? This atrocious, just terrible injury. But then now it's like, oh, she could die at any time. I mean, and I don't know. I haven't heard from her dad for a while. I don't even know if they're alive. So it was things like that. And it's just like, I still think of Mira, for example, the little girl with the bullet in her head, and she still needs evacuation. She needs a revision of her VP shunt. She's got repeated infections. And so you just never feel like your job is done because they're still they're still in danger. But another one that I remember was, during a mass casualty incident in Nasser one time, when I was there in August, a nurse was working, and suddenly she noticed her sister came in after an airstrike, and a lot of victims of gunshot wounds to the head came in. And in that, she didn't realize it was her sister. And the reason she didn't realize it is this girl, she was 16 years old. Her eyeball was completely out of her skull. She was so disfigured.
Didn't even recognize her.
That her sister didn't recognize her. And the only reason she recognized her, the nurse that was working, is because she recognized a relative that was with her that brought her in. And this girl was literally, she was, in her tent. She got shot in the head by one of these snipers or quadcopters. And we couldn't do anything for her. We had to literally watch her die in front of us. Because there was nothing that we could do to save her life or to provide a prognosis that was somewhat decent.
Yeah.
And I mean, those things happened all the time. There was a day in August where both of the trauma bays were filled with late teens or children, like adolescents or young children, with gunshot wounds in the head or some type of penetrating injury to the head.
Jesus.
And all of these patients, they were either intubated on a vent, or we were just waiting for them to die. So just palliative care for these people. I mean, and I remember we were going from vent to vent and just, they would be dead and we'd turn off the vent.
God.
I mean, it was just happening. It's mind-blowing, the magnitude of destruction.
I saw the picture of you with the girl with the bullet in her head, and you told me there's more than one. So you're saying that over and over you saw children being brought in, and with your own eyes to you.
Oh yeah, I mean that was just 18 that I have pictures of.
So you have 18 pictures from different children who were shot.
Different children who were shot in the head
or the chest, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, 3 of those photos that were published in the New York Times, those were all my patients.
Wow.
Those are small children. They were either shot in the neck, or the base of the skull or the head, and they all had bullets lodged there. And then there were a lot of children that came in with gunshot wounds to the head that were dead, that there was nothing we could do for them because they were dead. So they were obvious. Naturally, you're not going to take them to a CT scan to image them, right? So there were many, like that little boy I talked about. That's the little 3-year-old that was run over by a car. He was dead already.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to take him to a CT scan to image him, but he had one hole in his head. Gunshot wounds are not foreign to me. I've, born and raised in Chicago and trained in Chicago, worked as an attending in Chicago. So, and I worked at Cook County in Cook County, where just high penetrating trauma, and so that's not new to me. I know how to recognize a gunshot wound, right? So, and we saw that over and over again. It's just, very common.
Yeah. So I know you listened to my interview with Dr. Feroz, and I've seen a few of your interviews, and I like we talked about a little bit last night, and you mentioned I want to try to bring a slightly different perspective for some of the people. I mean, besides the fact that you are a woman, you're not of Palestinian, it's not like you have family over there. You have no blood relationship or reason to be biased about or lie about what you're seeing. You're definitely not an actor. I would know it.
Not good enough.
I know actors just a little. For those of you who know my background, know that's a fact. I'm wondering what else you can share that is a perspective that maybe people have not heard. Not that there's many people who are listening who may or may not be on the fence about this, but maybe people who are looking for information are trying to discern what's actually true because of the level of propaganda we're dealing with, and it's not like we have real journalists in America, and it's not like even if we did, they'd be allowed into Palestine to record what's happening. But I want you to try to offer your unique perspective, having been there and held these children, and having children of your own. Like what can you say to people who are still unsure if they should talk about this, or let alone maybe drop a letter to a representative, or let alone, take a look at where their tax dollars are being spent and how, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing I want to mention, you said women, and that's something that's ignored so often is women's health there. The mothers of Gaza. And of course, that kind of resonates with me, being a mother. But, the rate of miscarriage right now, so if you were to get pregnant, there's the rate of miscarriage is up 300%.
Oh my God, yeah.
That's like astronomical. Like, I can't even imagine that. And then when these babies are being born, they're being born preterm because mom is malnourished. Mm-hmm. And then they can't feed their baby because they're malnourished, right? So they can't produce breast milk. And you can't buy formula because it's not available. No. Or it's so ridiculously expensive that nobody can afford it. So you have this population of like permanently disabled babies, essentially, if they get to be born. Mm-hmm. And you're crippling this entire population.
And how can they even be fed? How can mom have any breast milk when she's malnourished?
Exactly. And this is what's been happening. That's what I saw a lot of in December. It just kept happening. I would see mothers come in and they were like so desperate. They were feeding their newborns sugar water because they didn't know what to do. And obviously babies, you can't feed them that, right? No. But what else are you going to do?
It's either that or nothing.
Exactly. And these babies would come in near dead, a failure to thrive, because they had nothing to kind of eat. But that's just something that like we don't hear a lot of, right? Because all we're seeing is these atrocious like physical injuries, which of course that's going to take precedence. But this is like a long-standing thing, and it's all manufactured. It's engineered.
You're right about that.
To happen right now to the people of Gaza. But I mean, people that are silent. First of all, if you're a parent, you should be scared of what your kids are going to ask you when they're
That's
grown.
What I said too.
Mom, what did you do? I know my kids would ask me, what did you do when this was happening? How could you guys have let this happen? That's what they're going to say.
Yeah.
And what are you going to have to show for it?
Me, a bunch of notifications that my account's been disabled.
Right. But I'm saying, like, those people that are silent, what are you going to say to your children, and how you're going to be held accountable? And you have to wake up every day and look at yourself in the mirror. I mean, this is not just about people of Gaza, right? This is about the human race.
It's about what's acceptable in the year 2025 for a species that's supposed to be at least a little bit evolved and quasi-spiritual, or at least coming into the understanding that we are spiritual beings inhabiting a body, Yeah. And even if we weren't, the simple morality, even if you were an atheist, is don't go around killing people and stealing stuff. You know what I mean? Like we shouldn't even need commandments. That should be common sense. It should be taught, and then that's it.
Yeah, and the people who this is affecting is really kind of irrelevant, because these are human beings.
That's right.
And I think people should be afraid that they're next. If they can happen to an entire population,
that's right.
This can happen to anybody.
That's exactly right. And if you haven't noticed, the United States, Europe to a degree, but the United States is very good at pushing populations in one direction or the next. We use fires, we use natural disasters, but they get what they want in the end, and it's usually under the guise of something else. They've learned how to do all kinds of things, and the technology is actually really old. We've been making it rain since Vietnam. We wanted to extend the monsoon season and get the North Vietnamese stuck in their foxholes. So we devised a plane and we laced the clouds with all kinds of chemicals and we made it rain and we made it rain, made it rain, made it rain. And if we were doing that in the 50s, tell me again why we have wildfires in the United States. If we can make it rain, how do we end up with ravaging, quote, wildfires, uncontainable? What are the implications? I mean, to me, the implications are fucking obvious. You know what I mean? Like, they couldn't be more obvious. But one of the things I'm constantly doing is considering the implications, of what's happening.
Yeah, that's a really important point, because I said this to you yesterday, is like, we are telling, all of us doctors, we come back from Gaza and we tell these sob stories, these sad stories, these devastating stories of patients. And, I'm happy to share them to expose what's happening. But there are implications of these stories. And that's what I want people to understand, is we are telling these stories with implications, and you should conclude what's happening because of the stories. Not just, oh, this is sad, this is a baby, oh yes, kids shouldn't get shot. But who is doing this? Why is it happening? It's completely unnecessary, and the sheer numbers are unacceptable.
And then what is the end game? I mean, obviously to decimate the population. People are like, oh, actually.
But the rhetoric too, right? The rhetoric that the Israeli government uses, for example, bombing hospitals. They use this rhetoric that Hamas is inside the hospitals, or there's a tunnel under the hospital.
Yeah.
So none of my colleagues, I never did. I lived there 4 weeks at a time inside the hospital, had access to all parts of the hospital, different hospitals, different times of the year. And I never saw anybody that was a fighter. I never saw weapons.
Not one, probably one suspicious soldier-looking,
never,
maybe doing,
never. Literally
sneaking
never.
into a closet.
Literally never. And like, we're humanitarians. We will treat anybody, right? We will treat anybody. It doesn't matter. I will treat an IDF soldier. Right. I don't care. It's a person. I will treat them. We just never saw them. And we spoke to the locals. We get close to the locals at all hours of the day. I just never saw it. And for them to say that they're inside the hospital or under the hospital, which they've never shown proof of. It's the one, I just saw a video, a ridiculous video that's completely edited, stopped and edited. And like, it's not even under the hospital. It was like under a different school or something. And we don't even know if it was a tunnel. It looked like a sewage system. But even if, say there was someone and they were undercover or something, does it justify bombing the entire hospital and killing all the civilians and the children? I mean, it just doesn't make sense, because I know that when Russia did that, for example, right, bombed a hospital, oh my gosh, it was like headlines, a war crime and this and that, and global outrage. What?
Makes you wonder if they actually did it or if it was just us.
But it's like, they do this. They've bombed every single hospital to date now.
Yep.
And nobody even flinches. Like, nobody even...
And that's what they're doing. They're normalizing this kind of...
It's normal to them because they use this, this story of, Hamas. It's kind of like the boogeyman. The boogeyman is there. That's why we had to do it. I mean, it's BS. It's not true. We would have seen something, and we would have heard something. We would have seen some gun or weapon or something.
Like people, like the comments are still like, why don't they just give back the hostages?
We never saw hostages.
Is this
I'm sure they're there.
If they wanted the hostages back, wouldn't they send strike teams to where the hostages are to try to rescue them or excavate them? Like, what are you talking about? Obviously, they don't give two shits about the hostages. America wanted its hostage back. We got it back in one day. We negotiated for it back.
This is clearly not about hostages. They could have gotten them back.
But the general public, which is completely ignorant, is like, if they wanted it to end, why wouldn't they just give back the hostages? I'm like, is this a serious? Like, I can't even begin to answer this.
Before March 18th, before the Israeli military unilaterally violated the ceasefire agreement, right? The whole idea was that there would be a phase 2, and then they would exchange the hostages and the Palestinian prisoners. That was all set to be in motion, but they just said, no, never mind. We're going to change the terms of this agreement. We want all the hostages, and we're not giving you anything.
Meanwhile, they have 10,000 Palestinians being held.
Yeah, but that's not how you come to terms with. That's not negotiation. They'd be idiots to say, "Oh,
Well,
sure, we'll give you everything and you give us nothing."
Well, they do that on purpose.
Yeah,
because they don't want. They never wanted a two-state deal. Netanyahu's on video saying, "Don't worry, there's never going to be a two-state deal." They've killed prime ministers and ousted them who were for a two-state deal. It was never part of the primary elements of the Israeli government's plan. And the politicians who got into office, who quietly were like, let's have some peace and let's do things right, they were ousted. And that's because the three main parts that formed the Israeli government were literal murderous terrorists. You have like the Knesset, I can never say these names.
Knesset. Yeah.
And two others, starts with an L. These were the people, to understand who founded this government. This were the same people who, when they made the deal with Hitler and Goebbels in the Havara Agreement, and they said, listen, we'll make you a deal, we'll float your economy this, but we want your Jews, send us your Jews. And of course, Goebbels was like, we're more than happy to do that, but for the most part, they are the most affluent people in our country. So why would they? How would you like us to do that? Because they're just going to just want to move to the Middle East into a desert surrounded by Arab people. Mm-hmm. And they were like, the deal was, and they were told, we want them to feel that there is only one safe place for them on this earth, and that is Palestine, which would become Israel later on. It wasn't Israel officially yet. And so it was during that time where they said, and this is where the Bush family comes into play, they set up escrows. They said, listen, we'll do this like this. You make the families move, you get them on a train or you put them on a boat, you get them to Palestine. We will hold all their property, all their equity in an escrow created by our friends in America, like the Bushes. The Bushes formed the banks that did this with the Dulles brothers, some of the most corrupt elements the United States government has ever had the unfortunate, to be dealing with. But the money went into escrow. They said, then when they get here, we'll get them settled. We'll take their money out of escrow. And we'll force them to buy German goods, since there's a worldwide embargo on you right now. Because the actual global Jewish community was very upset when Hitler kicked all the Jews out of his government. And that's why the embargo happened in 1933. New York Times ran the headlines, Judea declares war on Germany and Hitler, because they felt his move to push out all people of Jewish descent out of his government was racist, which it was, but he couldn't tell which one was a communist and which wasn't. And since the communists were predominantly Jewish in Germany at the time, he kicked them all out. And that brought the entire Jewish global community down on him. You can read the headlines, Judea declares war, worldwide embargo on Germany, right? So during this time, they were sending ships. They were rounding people up, forcing them to go to Palestine. The Germans were. And one of the ships that they were put on was called either El or La Patria. And it was filled with Jews on their way to Palestine. And they decided, somebody made the executive decision, and they had enough influence, that they were going to go past Palestine. They were going to go to another place, like Meritus, or starts with an M. They'd changed their location. And I think it was it was either the one that starts with an L, or it starts with an the Knesset, the Knesset, heard about the ship, knew they were coming, saw them go by, got in their own boats and went and blew up the ship filled with Jews. And they said they were martyrs for their homeland. Mm. They never apologized. They admitted that they slaughtered hundreds of Jews in an act of terrorism, and they said they did it because for the good of the homeland, they had to be sacrificed because they didn't want to come there. They wanted to go somewhere else. Those are the kind of people you're talking about. Those are the people who formed the Israeli government. That's a fact. You can read about it. Google El Patria. Google the ship. It's not in dispute. It's not a theory. This is the government that was formed. That is the IDF. This is how we got into the mess we are. These people, for the most part, are ruthless, and they will kill their own people without a second thought if those people are not going along with what their notion of Israel is going to be and should be. So I'm just putting that out there because people don't understand. People see the government, they're like, they would never do that. No, they've been doing that. They've been slaughtering innocents from their inception. That is how they formed Israel.
Yeah, there's been insidious, just complete destruction from the very first day. And it's obvious, it's very obvious when you actually go to Gaza. That this didn't start, on one day in 2023.
No.
It's very obvious when you go there that it was an apartheid. It's an apartheid state. So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the other thing too, you asked me, from my perspective, like, what did I see that we should understand is, in an emergency department, we see a lot of psychiatric cases. We see people with depression. We see sometimes, unfortunately, we see children with depression. But I never saw so many small children who would rather die than be alive.
My God.
I just never saw it. I mean, before, not that. I just, honestly, I'm trying to think about all of the kids that I saw. And I don't think I ever saw someone so young saying, I wish I would have died with my family.
My God.
But it's so common there. I remember when I was at Al-Aqsa, there was like a group of kids that were following me around. They always follow the foreign doctors around. They're the cutest little kids. Because they try to welcome you and stuff, and they just want to be kids, They like, we give them balloons and chocolate because chocolate's banned from entering. So we would bring chocolate and lollipops and things like that to give to them. Which are so novel.
Why chocolate?
Because apparently this is
no
what
happiness.
I just read. Well, I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is actually like true or not, but they said that the Hamas could sell it and gain profit from it, so they don't allow chocolate.
Wow.
I think same to do with like certain types of coffee, but don't quote me on that. But anyway, you can't bring those type of things. They're not allowed to have them, so we would give them to the kids. But I remember these kids telling me, like, they were saying how they wish they had school, they wish they had these things. But then a kid came in and he's like, he made this gesture of like a bomb hitting him. It's like, oh, I wish a bomb would hit me because then I could be with my family.
Yeah.
I mean, I've just never seen something like that. Like it's, and to see it so often. I remember a little girl that came in. I think it was in one of the, I don't remember if it was Newsweek or what, but they took this picture of me. They're always taking care of a little girl who is, I think she couldn't have been older than like 3 or 4 years old, but she had burns like head to toe. She was burnt completely, like, serious degree burns. And I was trying to look at her wounds and like debride them, and she was staring up like to the ceiling, just completely dissociated. And I hadn't given her any medications because I didn't have anything to give her. So this is extremely painful. Burns are extremely painful. But I remember her just looking up into space and humming a lullaby. I mean, completely inappropriate and abnormal response to what's happening, right? She should be crying.
Totally dissociated.
Completely dissociated and humming a lullaby. And I was like, I had the
That's
medical
so comforting,
student.
though.
It was so sad to see that. And she was just motionless. She's like letting me touch her, do anything. It's just not normal.
Completely absconded from her body.
Exactly. Dissociated, completely dissociated. And we saw kids like that. I remember a small boy who was like 13 years old, I think, came in with his mom. And the father and the mom and the son, they had all gone to Rafah, which was at that time evacuated. And completely destroyed too in August. But they had gone back to see if anything was left of their home or anything that belonged to them they could salvage still, like food or anything. And a sniper, like shot the dad while he was inside the house. And then there was an airstrike to the house, like a bomb just exploded in the house. And this guy was brought in. He was still smoking. Like there was still smoke coming out of his body. He was still warm, like hot on his clothes, and his legs were completely amputated, like both of his legs. And his wife was there, and he was still taking like the last breaths you take. They're called agonal respirations, the last breaths you take before you die.
Yeah.
And his mother had been trying to get him to a hospital, but no one was able to go and get him in Rafah because it's an unsafe zone.
Yeah.
And so it took her forever to get someone to agree to bring him. And so they brought him in. And I just remember the son. He was 13 years old. And I looked at him, and they looked at me to see what I was going to do to save his life. But I knew there's nothing I could do.
Right.
I mean, he was charred, and like he was going to die. He was taking his last breaths. But I like just bent down. He was on the ground. I just bent down to pretend I was like listening to his chest, or that I'm doing something, you know? And I just looked up, and the mom was hysterical, right? She was like screaming and just completely traumatized. But the boy, I'll never forget his eyes. He was just staring out into a wall, just space ahead of him. He wouldn't flinch. He wasn't moving, just motionless, standing there. And he just saw his father get killed in front of him. And I'll never forget that day. I was like, tearing up, and I don't cry at work or anything. This is just like we compartmentalize, but in Gaza, I cried every day. But I remember there was this like a team psychiatrist that was there with us, and she just went and like tried to hug the boy or touch him. And he was like a board, stiff as a board.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, you imagine the scarring that kid has for the rest of his life if he doesn't get killed.
People cannot begin to fathom what that kind of trauma does to a boy or a girl at that age. There was this crazy study ended up coming out of World War II. There was an orphanage, I believe it was World War II, that was stumbled upon, that was abandoned. And when our soldiers got in, they heard what they didn't want to hear, and that was complete silence, in the orphanage. Mm-hmm. All the kids were left strapped to their beds, chained to their beds, with basically in their own feces. There was some gruel that was left that almost all of them that could move were finished. Many of them were dead, but there were a few that were alive. And I think the ages were like about anywhere from 1 to like 10 years old. And so when this story went out, it was it made the press in America. And so a lot of affluent families, were very touched by the story, and they wanted to help these children. And so a lot of affluent families some of them got more than one. And what they found was, if the child was, I think it was under 2 years old, there was a chance that and this child was given every opportunity. The parents had a lot of money. They went to the same schools as the other kids. There was a chance that they could be rehabilitated. The ones that were like 4 years and older who suffered this trauma, some of them raised in the same family as these younger kids. There was no drugs, suicide, self-sabotage, crime, violence. There was no amount of counseling. There was no amount of therapy that could rid these young people of those tendencies, which become ingrained in the DNA from continued exposure of trauma, let alone the disassociative, if you've ever suffered systemic abuse or trauma, then you already have an idea of the level of damage that is done on a subconscious level, so that when you go out and operate in the world, the decisions you're making are coming from all kinds of faulty programming, that you're not even aware of. And what we're going to see come out of Gaza from these kids is going to be every bit as bad as the bombings and the atrocities, because these kids are going to have a struggle,
Yeah, and I don't want people to think like, oh, well, it's a lost cause. Let's just kill them all now because they're going to be terrorists anyway, or whatever.
No,
the
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they're
right.
Going to, yeah.
But I mean, just like anyone who goes through abuse or has any childhood trauma, like you can get therapy. You can, if you stop the trauma, you can absolutely heal. But we have to stop. You have to stop sending bombs there first of all, and then allow them to eat. And have just like basic human rights. That's the biggest thing. All of it can be repaired still. It's still not too late.
No, it's not. It's not too late. I'm just saying, like, even if you stop everything today or tomorrow, the damage is done in every way. You know,
Yeah.
and these kids are going to need
Absolutely.
a lot of love and help and whole programs just for them because they've been exposed probably on a level that no other generation has.
Yeah, and we haven't even scratched the surface of mental health, right? Like you can't because there's no room for it.
No.
Like if you're dealing with like things that you have to do surgery on and physical trauma, how do you even start with the psychology part of it, the psychiatric part of it?
Can't even begin.
Yeah, I mean, these NGOs, they had a pilot program for like psychiatric services that actually was working. Like it was for the healthcare workers, the local healthcare workers. But it's just there's so many other things needed that kind of goes to the back burner, unfortunately. But it is equally important.
Yeah.
It can't be ignored. It certainly cannot be. But yeah, even the people that are evacuated, miraculously they leave. There's some people that have left, and they're suffering from so much PTSD.
Yeah.
I think one of the journalists that I had met when I was there, he's now in Ireland, Abu Bakr. He's amazing. But he was evacuated for medical reasons because he was so malnourished. But he's in Ireland, and I saw an interview of his. How he still hears like a helicopter overhead, and he gets scared that they're going to kill him or they're going to bomb the area around him. And I can't imagine. I was there 4 weeks, and I live by a private airport, and every time I hear a small plane, I'm like, just for a second, I panic.
Mm-hmm.
But these are people that have been going through it most of their life. They hear drones overhead their entire life. It never goes away.
No.
So just imagine how that feels. When you're taken out of it, you're still thinking about it.
Totally, it never goes away, and it becomes a real inhibitor to try to get over if you want to live a functional life.
Yeah.
So before we switch gears and go and get a little more far out into our metaphysical, is there anything else you want to say to the audience and leave them with? And also, before we're done, we'll tell them how to follow you and where they can keep up on some things. But I want to make sure that you have covered what you were hoping to cover and shared what you were hoping to share. And I want to give you an opportunity to say what you need to say before this is, before we transition into something maybe a little on the lighter side.
Yeah, no, I think, what I want people to understand is that they need to speak up and they need to understand that their voice is important. Because a lot of this, like we were talking about yesterday, is, people think, well, what could I do on one person? But if everybody thought that way, 8 billion people,
that's right,
we would do nothing, right? There would be no change, nothing would happen. But the tide is turning.
Mm-hmm.
I do see it. A lot of things are changing, and I see it in social media a lot because that's where the youth is.
Yeah.
But we have to say something, and it can be in different forms. I think everybody has a role. It's an ecosystem, right? Everybody has a role. You have podcasts. You don't have to do media. You can do letters, to state representatives. And so there's a lot of ways to do it. I've seen artists and musicians do a lot of things and use their voice. And it just, everybody needs to come together though, right? And even people like the flotilla, like they're citizens and they're just gonna do it. Or there's a march to Gaza coming up. And so everybody has a way to do something, but just being silent and complicit is not an option.
No.
And that's what I want people to understand. Like, just imagine Gaza too. It's such a small zone. It's such a small area.
Yeah.
There's no humanitarian area. You know how they say, well, this is the humanitarian zone now. This is the green zone. There's no such thing.
No.
When we were there, most of our patients came from this said humanitarian zone. So that what that means is
that's where they're bombing.
But they say that that's the area you can go for safety. But there is no such place. So if I drop a 2,000-pound bunker bomb across the street, and that's the unsafe zone, you're in the humanitarian zone. Guess what? You're going to get hit by that bomb too, right?
Yeah.
It's not how it works. And they're not necessarily known for their precision attacks because they're not making any attempt for that. They can when they want to, but they're deliberately not doing that. So they are dropping these indiscriminate bombs on these neighborhoods. So there is no area where people can actually go to. So even when they're getting these evacuation orders, like I have friends I talk to every day who are like, well, we're not going anywhere because there's no place to go.
Right.
They're sending us to the sea. Where are we going to stay? So just think about what that feels like.
Yeah.
There's no place to hide. There's no place to go for safety. And now you're starved, completely starved. There's a famine. So, you know, it's the situation is terrible. It's getting worse. But I think it's important to understand that you have to be held accountable if you are being silent at this point.
Yeah.
I think that it's too late to say I didn't know.
Yeah.
Or that it's too complicated of a situation where I don't know much about
Right.
it, so I don't want to say.
Do you need to know anything more than tens of thousands of children have been murdered, have been slaughtered by American bombs?
Deliberately, yeah.
On purpose? Do you need, I mean, even if it was 500, even if it was 25, what more do you need to know? You know, if you can't speak up for them, who can you speak up for? What's it going to take is my question to everyone listening who has remained silent for whatever their reasons are, whether you are Jewish or whatever your ethnicity. What is controversial about speaking up for children? It doesn't matter what race you are, what ethnicity you are. You should make your voice heard, even if that's sharing a post, even if it's sharing this video. Sharing knowledge is the way that we enlighten the world.
Yeah, and this is unprecedented. This is not the same, right? The number of people that have been killed in this amount of time is unprecedented.
Totally.
So this is what people need to understand, because yes, there are atrocities around the world. There are unfortunate situations going on, but this is different. And the U.S. is directly causing it. So that's the big message, is that we are causing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. And people are like, what about Somalia? I'm like, are we funding?
Yeah, or
Are we
Sudan,
funding
yeah.
the? Are we paying for those bombs too? Well, no. We'll talk about that after this. Okay.
Yeah, and it's just as bad. It's bad. It's bad. It's very bad. And I agree 100%.
Yeah.
But I mean, our bombs, our Apaches, and our, you know, it's not there.
That's right.
So.
So let's go far out a little. On a lighter note, my friend, you told me last night that you're not really religious, but you consider yourself, and it was
Just principles of Jainism.
Of Jainism.
Of nonviolence.
Nonviolence.
Yeah, ahimsa. And
where does Jainism come from?
It's one of the oldest, actually, I think it's the oldest religion, and I'm no expert in it. And I came to learn about it later in life. But just the principles of it. And it's not even a really organized religion.
Yeah.
It's not.
I was going to say.
It's just principles of living, right? Don't, just like you said before, don't lie, don't steal, you know.
Right.
Don't hoard, those type of things. Truthfulness, you know, and multiple truths. I think that's one of the tenets of it too,
like
is
that.
multiple truths.
If only more religions had that as a tenet.
Yeah, like multiple things could be true at the same time.
I wouldn't have such a problem with them. Yeah.
Yeah, that whole idea.
Not that they could be. They usually are true at the same time. You know?
Yeah. So and just the nonviolence, like we, you know, I guess we call us hippies. We have like animals that we save, and we don't eat meat and those type of things.
Yeah.
So
I did notice that when we went out for steak last night.
Yeah, take me to steakhouse.
No, they had great steak. They had tofu.
They had very good options. Yes, very good vegan options. I was actually very surprised, but yeah, and so I think, and raising kids in that environment, I think, is very important as well. Just a set of principles to live by.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a religion. It's just basic human values that we should all
that's what it sounds
have,
like.
right? Nonviolence is something we should all agree to. So yeah, I mean, just that.
So I know doctors are notorious because you guys are trained, you know, to treat the flesh, right? You're trained to treat this physical body, and you know the system in place is not exactly what, you know, like chiropractic has like this element that includes kind of the holistic and the spiritual interconnectedness between the body and the mind, but doctors, and specifically the Rockefeller system, just kind of steers away from that and keeps you guys really focused. But some doctors can be very spiritually oriented and have a great understanding of the interconnectedness between mind, body, and spirit, and health is wealth, and all these as above, so below, all these sayings, they come from somewhere. And I'm wondering, if, like, where you stand in all that, if you've, if you've been in the room with someone who has had a spontaneous remission, or like, how do you reconcile that with your training?
You mean like people who didn't undergo actually the conventional treatment?
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't really seen patients like that. Of course, I work in the emergency department.
Oh,
I have to
yeah.
remember,
So that's a little different.
So
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
get to hold your hand and stay there for
Right.
hours. But so our environment is very fast paced.
Yeah.
But there are certainly spiritual aspects to treating patients, right? And of course, we deal with death a lot in the emergency department. So I have seen patients at end of life, and and I'm sure there's spiritual aspects of it.
I forgot you were trauma. I forgot you were ER.
Yeah,
That's
and
yeah.
exactly. So I don't really get to do the touchy feely stuff.
Yeah.
I'm kind of working in a fast paced, stressful environment.
Yes.
But I absolutely think you're right. There is a spiritual aspect to healing. Certainly that we can't deny. And just kind of the mental, the power of mental health and things like that,
Yeah.
that can absolutely contribute to a well-being of a person.
Totally.
So
I mentioned because my last guest, Anita Morjani, her name is, she had she had lymphatic metastasized cancer and like over 99 tumors. I mean, all that was left of her at one point was the tumors. And her organs failed. She went into a coma, and then she had this near-death experience. And she was shown a great many things, but one of the ones was that she had made herself sick, with her life, with what she had done, and how much she had allowed others to dictate her happiness instead of loving herself, and she was given a choice to go back into her body, which she was like, anything but that, like that's been suffering for years, there's nothing to go back to. It's destroyed, like what else? What are the other options? And she was shown that if she went back, she would heal very quickly. That she understood now why she got sick in the first place. And so other people's life mission were going to be incomplete if she didn't go back, and she still had her mission to complete. And so she decided to go back. And within 5 weeks, when she first woke up, they thought she was just having that last lucid moment that people have, But she was like, no, I'm not going anywhere.
Oh, wow.
And so they literally watched the tumors shrink over the next couple of weeks before their eyes. And then within 5 weeks, they couldn't find the cancer. And she has all the medical records to prove this. And they were like, what the fuck is going on here? They couldn't believe it, but they had to let her go after 5 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So she goes around and she teaches, she speaks, she's a speaker now, and she talks about her near-death experience, which was very, very vivid and extraordinary, and the insight she gained under it. So I was just mentioning it because, you're a doctor, and she was with a lot of doctors for a long time, and they couldn't believe it. So,
we could certainly come up with a scientific explanation for that near-death experience.
I'm sure you could.
Yeah.
I'm sure they could. Yeah, more than one. Although she said that in the medical records they wrote they have no explanation. They can't.
Yeah. No.
I've been lucky. I've been around and been a party to people who have been given, stage 4 diagnosis, 6 months to live, and who have found a way to rid themselves of that, not only that diagnosis, but what made them sick. So it's a pretty incredible age we're living in. But trauma work is I always got to remind myself that is something, first of all, extraordinary. I think it's the best part of Western medicine is the way that we can work with people who need trauma medical attention, because you guys can fix just about anything. If there's one thing I admire about that system is the work that, like if if you get into a car wreck, you want to end up in an ER in America somewhere,
Right.
because we got the best there is. And so I take my hat off to you for that. That is a high anxiety, can be very stressful job, and you're literally saving lives. You're a lifesaver, and that's honorable. It's noble. It's commendable. And so before we go, let me ask you real quick: have you ever seen a UFO? Have you ever had any experience with with that kind of inexplicable phenomenon? Whether it be maybe it was an orb, maybe it was a light, maybe it was what you might think of maybe a ghost. Like, have you ever had a supernatural /
I never know, right? You never know.
Yeah.
So it's funny you asked that, because when I was younger, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronomer. Right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I had like a whole path for this career that I was going to do, and I actually started majoring in physics when I first started.
Wow.
And I chose this school because they had this this observatory. But so I was really into that. And I went to Space Academy. I graduated from
Wow,
Space
I didn't know
Academy
that.
in Huntsville, Alabama. Yeah. So it was a big part of my life. But yeah, I think we all like kind of see something that we're like, oh my God, what was that? So I live out, kind of in a rural area. I guess I drive to a rural area for work, but I remember once I was driving and I saw these lights, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is it? But it was a pattern that was different than what I had ever seen. But it turns out there are military planes like that, and I live by a base. Well,
they're also military craft.
So I live by one of the bases, and they kind of test different things out. Yeah. But it's always like at the top of your mind, like, oh my God, what if,
Yeah.
It's like that's that whole saying where like it would be an awful waste of space if we were the only ones here.
Oh.
And Carl Sagan and stuff, I was a big fan of, and so. Yeah, I'm kind of a nerd in that. So.
That explains another reason what drew you here. Besides our both our joint passion for this issue that's happening. That's it's your sense that it was probably one of our craft is probably right on, because we have built our own fleet, and they're virtually indistinguishable from the ones we recovered and reverse engineered them from, which is scary because the government has contractors who have these things, and that means they can do what they always do and create spectacles and attacks, and it's just scary to imagine that this is not imagine, but in my case, know that this is what's underground. But the difference is, and if you ever see one again, what you can do is consciously reach out to it, and if it's a government replica, there's going to be no indication whatsoever that it has any awareness of you. But if it's one of theirs, if it's truly one of our celestial families, it will respond to you.
Really?
Yeah. So from the heart, you just reach out, and that's a coherent signal, like a laser, and they can hone in on that. And if you're like, don't go, you watch them turn around. That's how you know that it's one of theirs. I mean, a real one, and not one of our fucking military replicas just doing their rounds or testing their flight patterns.
I'll try it out.
Try it out. That's it. But Dr. Mimi, tell everyone where they can keep up with you. I know you're very busy saving lives by day, but you do have a social media presence. You've been on CNN. You've been on a bunch of different things. So if people want to follow you, to keep up with you, where can they find you? Yeah,
I'm on Instagram, and it's Dr. Mimi ER, so DRMIMIER. And I recently joined X. Under Memers 1ST, so MEMERS 1ST, and then I think I just joined something called Blue Sky or something. It's like a new one. Have you heard of that?
Not yet, no.
I don't know. Anyway, you're not going to really see like selfies and things like that. It's all about Gaza, and it's advocacy work that I've been doing, and that some of my colleagues have done. So. If you want more information about, what's happening and just talking points, those are really important, I think, just to empower people to have the confidence to talk about it. Mm-hmm. So that's, those are a good places. But there's a bunch of resources on social media as well.
Yeah. And thank you to our mutual friend and soldier in arms, Josephine, for introducing us. Yes. We missed you. I was talking about you last night, how much fun we had, even though the subject matter we talked about was not that much fun.
Josie's my hero.
She's she's a fire. She's amazing.
Yep.
So love you, Josephine. Thank you for introducing Dr. Mimi and I, and we got her down here from Washington. So listen, if you're listening on YouTube, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button, because we know a great many people who are listening are not subscribers. So please remember to do that. And if you're on Spotify or iTunes, we need all the 5-star reviews we can get. So if you like the work that we're doing and you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a couple stars, whatever you feel appropriate. And also, if you write us a review, they go a long way as well. We're trying to accumulate them. Maybe one day somebody will want to sponsor this crazy podcast. Maybe if I stop talking about all the illegal activities the government does, I might get more sponsors, but I can't do that. Anyway, I love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Dr. Mimi. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Honor.
It's my pleasure.